Go on in. Grab a agenda and
Hey, bud. Good. How you doing? Is there a restroom down here somewhere?
on the other side, yeah. Just have them buzz you the other way.
Fire that up.
Is Barufi?
He's out of town.
Oh,
Oh, that's right. He's down
okay.
on the southern hemisphere.
Trying to be. New Zealand, right? New Zealand, right?
There we go. Well, they might hope there wasn't an earthquake on us.
Tsunami thing, is there a about? Yeah.
They were one in Japan. Was there? Was it 6 something? Wow.
Okay. So I have a gavel, but we'll call the meeting to order. Welcome all to the Citizen Budget Subcommittee meeting on the 21st of January. Great to get back. We're a little bit early this year, but I think everybody's excited. And I mean, just look at the peanut gallery. They're just smiles all over. Anyway, so the key thing. Sure. Yeah. Well, let's do around the room. So I'm Chris Pulver. Right now I'm the chair, but we're going to switch it. We're going to vote eventually to get one of the citizens to chair the meeting. But I'm also on the city council for North Ogden. Next.
I'm Brian Bartholomew. I was on the committee last year and here I am again.
Mike, maybe I was on last year as well and doing it again.
Sandy Cochran, I've been on last year and then the first year you all had it.
I think there's 3 years. This is number 4, if I'm counting right. So you've skipped a year. Anyway, moving on.
Did, yeah.
Bill Swanson, and on all 4 years.
Nice.
First time here.
Cool.
Phil and John wrote me into this.
See, there you go.
Yeah.
Look what happened. And then we have the illustrious John Call, city manager, city attorney. And then staff, do you want to introduce yourself or just say staff? Staff.
It is important to note, we got
Yeah.
Peter, who's here on the front row on the right, who's the finance director. So,
Okay, what was next? Next was thought, invocation, pledge of allegiance. Any volunteers? No?
I don't think I remember it all.
Well, you don't have to. Everybody says it together. But does anybody want to do a thought or an invocation? If not, I can. Okay. I will do an invocation. So, Heavenly Father, we're so blessed to have all these new people here today and to discuss the city budget, and so grateful for all the things that we have in life. And Lord, as we look to have a great meeting, we ask thee to look over us and make the right decisions. And I say these things in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen. Okay. Pledge of allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I'm riding a bike.
Right. Surprisingly, yeah.
Okay, so one of the things that we kind of just to go over, I mean, some of this will be old school for some of you, but and of course, things, yeah, is just to kind of go over what I made a charter. I guess I'm a dorky engineer, so things have to make sense to me if they have to be written down. So, but we've kind of tweaked this over the years. And so really the mission of what we're doing here is to explore and recommend to city council options for cost savings. City council is has the purse strings for the city. And so anything that can be, obviously cost savings, we don't want to add anything, but I think some years we have said to look into this or look into that. I think one year was several years ago was the flock system, I think was a recommendation to keep it. So that is a cost thing, but anyway, and then provide feedback related to anything that the city shouldn't be doing. and the city's not doing something that they should be doing. So those are two kind of obviously polar opposites, but and then ideas to better serve the community and streamline processes. I think that's kind of the key thing we're looking at is how do we save, I don't want to say pennies, but definitely, obviously pennies add up. But I think for the big thing, what we're trying to find in this, we don't have really a ton of time unless you spend a ton of time outside of this meeting, which is some of it, we'll be talking about that too. But to be sure that you understand and come with questions and or solutions, that's kind of the key thing. And then in the end is to strive to find or explain any findings or plans in a way that makes sense to everybody. And usually what I use is my wife is kind of the, if I can explain it to her, I can explain it to anybody. But because, she follows a lot of the city stuff. In fact, that's a lot of the sounding board I get. I might not please her in many decisions, but at the same time, she's only one person in the city. So anyway, so decorum, things will get heated. It's shocking that you think that it won't, but I think early on we had some pretty interesting shows. Sandy has been part of those, but we had to have co-chairs at a couple points to better figure things out. Anyway, I don't think we'll have a worry about that, but I think the key thing is to have free flow of ideas, nothing stupid. Everything gets voted on. I mean, we were down into the weeds such that, like for city council meetings, don't print out a budget. Everybody should be able to see it online. But people love paper. So anyway, I mean, there's things like that. Let's see. So we'll talk about a chair. I don't know if we'll do it at the beginning or end, but we need to come up with one of the citizens will be the chair that will conduct the meeting. And then we'll have a specific topic that we're going to talk about, and obviously with an agenda, so that you know ahead of time what to expect during the meeting, and so that you can come prepared. And then any decision that the committee has will be done based on a simple majority. I won't be voting, John won't be voting, but it'll be the citizens that will decide what gets forwarded onto the city council for recommendations. And that's why I was talking about the minutes, because it isn't here minutes, but I think city meeting agenda will be created for each meeting. And then obviously documentation also, any recommendations will be passed up to city council as soon as they possibly can, so that the city council has time to ruminate on that, whatever recommendation it is. That was really fast. Any comments or questions or thoughts?
I got some questions.
Go right ahead.
Remind me again, the time frame is January through May, is that correct? And that's when we present to the council, and then it's a once a month. And then also, can we have a follow-up from last year on what we presented to the council? Phil did that, and the response from the council, and then thoughts on that. Does that make sense? So
Yeah.
Number of questions there in one.
Which one do you want to answer first?
What was our time frame of this? It's a January through May, once a month, correct? Or I can't remember.
No, we're gonna meet here trying every other,
Okay.
yeah, so every other, what'll be on Wednesday? Yeah.
Yeah.
Been a weird week. Every other Wednesday at 3:00 here, that was kind of the key thing to see how many people show up, and
Yeah.
there's a lot of folks that couldn't make it today, at least 3 or 4. Some haven't come yet. I don't know if it's just they haven't found it, but we'll figure it out.
And our target goal to be finished and have a recommendation for the council is,
I think recommend, because we did it in sections last time, right? So such that I think that helped, at least me as a city council
Yeah,
person.
we made recommendations by department as we went along, and then there was a kind of a summation at the end, but that was beginning of May, if I remember right, because we wanted to have it done before the tentative budget needed to be passed, which is
Yeah,
May
around that.
12th, somewhere around there.
Yeah.
Is that right, John?
Yeah, first regular meeting
Yeah.
in
so
May.
target this year for that time frame.
Yeah, and I think the sooner the better, as soon as the yellow sheets come out and departments have their final budget, then we should be looking at them. But in my opinion, there's nothing that says we can't look at if you're looking for details as to what to look at and what not to look at, last year's stuff shouldn't change too much.
Right.
The big hitters or the changes, those are what we should be discussing. So you can look at the yellow sheets from last year, and if there's something you missed or something you want to talk about, bring it up, let's go, you know. It's just that, you know, each, budget, department head, I can't remember is the limit, not limit, the deadline for their tentative budget is, was it March?
Well, so we typically get their tentative budget in, so the council can start going through
Mhm.
and talking about it in April at the first.
But I
work
thought the yellow
session.
sheets had to be in by a certain date or something.
So I was just walking backwards. So that means the department heads are finishing them in March so that Peter can get them into the budget for April.
Okay.
And they're always wiggling a little bit, but, and what we used to try and get this group together in like end of February, beginning of March, and we're just finding it wasn't enough time for you to really, because we were forcing it into 2 or 3 departments at a time, and it just, you know, maybe wasn't as effective as it has, or we hoped it would be.
Last question is, can you get a follow-up on from last year's recommendations? And that would be from Chris, you and John. And I can't remember all of the details that you presented at the city council meeting, so.
Yeah, I'd have to pull it up. There weren't any major recommendations last year. It was a pretty clean budget and there were a few odds and end kind of things, but I don't remember there being anything.
There were a few recommendations that were made for catastrophic planning and
Yeah,
some of those type of things.
but no
Outside
direct,
of,
no direct budget recommendations. Have this, drop that, or whatever. Wasn't anything.
there wasn't, I think the newsletter thing was probably one of the bigger things that.
Mhm.
So that was a finding too, that we had caught something. Was that it?
Yeah,
Yeah. So, I mean, I swear I had done that, so I'll have to go back and look to see if I.
So as I recall, last year, the budget was supposed to be basically flat. And that's how we went through it, and there wasn't any increases, and then we got to there ended up being a tax increase, truth and taxation meeting. And I believe that was turned down by the state because there was a technicality.
Yeah.
My memory
Yep.
correct on that. So with a zero budget increase was the recommendation and the plan through the whole committee last year. And then you guys decided to do a tax increase. What did we miss there? How did that happen?
What do you mean? How did
Well, if
we,
there's no budget increase, there wouldn't be a tax increase. And somewhere the tax increase was decided on and.
well, there was some, tweaks to certain things because of, I think the biggest thing was, personnel was the biggest thing, and then, I'm blanking on the other parts, but there was 3 other things that were in there that increased that couldn't get around. And so we picked the smallest increase we could
Right.
to cover that. And I was trying to raise the revenue, but the sales tax revenue. But we were finding that was a little bit edgy, and nobody else wanted to go higher just to cover that, so that we didn't have to ask for that increase. But, you know, that's the council's decision that
Right.
they wanted to keep it at 5%, Anyway.
over 5.
Okay.
the
And-
sales tax thing.
Then with the rejection from the state on the tax increase, is that back on the schedule again this year from the council? And is that gonna be their goal, or what happened there? Basically, nothing happened because of the technicality?
Yeah,
And
do we have to start there? You were anticipating that, so,
So.
seems to me that's gotta be made up or something.
So what we've done as department heads and with Peter's help is just kind of see where we could trim out and eliminate stuff that maybe we otherwise needed or wanted. But that $132,000 is, I think, what it was. Basically, it's not coming in unless sales tax comes in higher. And we did go conservative on sales tax, and so we kind of programmed no increase over what we actually received last year, even though we did plan an increase over what we budgeted last year, because we got 6% higher than what we budgeted last year. But we basically budgeted to not exceed that 6% this year. There's like 3 things moving there.
But your
sorry.
main concern is, are we gonna have to budget for a tax increase this coming year? The
Well-
answer is no.
but it sounds like that's the plan. If there's
No.
already a 6%, since they didn't get it last year, is that automatically on the agenda for the goal this year?
Necessarily.
Or then it's gonna be an increase because 6% from last year plus 4% from this year is a 10%. Does that question make sense? And am I
the question makes sense, but the key thing is that there's a lot of things that Peter has found, I say found in the budget, but things that timing wise have made a net zero. I want to say that kind of sort of for the final one for this current year that we're in. So if unless something else comes up that I don't remember, we don't think we kicked any cans in on, or did we? We might have.
We eliminated like one of the, Bowery and
Yeah.
restroom upgrades and things like
I
that.
think that's what,
So that-
I mean, to me, that's what's gonna happen is that if you needed it next year, we need to find out what the status is for this year. Is it not needed anymore? If it's not, why was it needed then? I think we need to cover that deficit that you lost in our discussion. I mean,
Yeah, and there's
say
a,
what
there's a
we're
lot
not-
of,
You know, what you planned to do that must have been critical, but now we can't do it, so.
there's a lot of
Not
whisperings too.
everything that we planned on doing that got cut out because of the technicality error, or what you would call critical things. They're, like adding a Bowery, that's a good thing to have, and it's something that we want to do to improve the park system, but it's not critical, like we need to replace a pressure relief valve.
Yeah, well, that's what I'm
Pressure
asking,
reduction
you know,
valve.
what were you planning to do that you couldn't do, and is it critical?
Right, and I think we'll get to that as we go through the budget
I mean,
department
yeah,
by
that's just,
department.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's one thing I think ought to be covered.
So it sounds like maybe that first question, which is what was recommended and then what maybe the nuanced changes are, is something that could be an agenda item for the next meeting that, we could come with, hey, here was the presentation that was made by the committee. Here's the areas of the council where it was discussed. And then also what sort of changes have happened with that 132,000 coming out. Just to.
It's not it seems easy, like when you're doing it and talking about it, but then you come back 6 months later and try to explain it.
Well, and the
Yeah.
city's at a
Yeah.
good spot, even though,
Yeah.
we weren't able to have that tax increase. Right, the city's, we've done without some things that was felt was needed to do. So, because you don't have an option, right? You just have to do it. And so we're in a good place. I don't think we're in a place where we're automatically starting at that 132,000 increase and then seeing what else there is. I think we're starting where we are every year,
Right.
and we'll get the budget, we'll look at it, and we'll see what's necessary and what's needed.
Well, I just think if that was a critical thing is in there, we need to find out it's not a critical thing now, or why, and why not.
Yep.
I agree.
Granted, it had to be covered some way, but
Yeah, understanding that not everything that was asked for was critical. And we don't only approve critical items. Right? There are things that are non-critical in an infrastructure, life, safety, health kind of thing of the city, like improving a park or, park equipment and things like that, that are good and necessary for the city, but they're not what you would call critical. Right? They're not critical to the livelihood of the city, but they are necessary for certain aspects of the city. It's a prioritization kind of.
I mean, to me, whether they're critical or not, I would just like to know what was
Sure.
not done.
Yeah.
And then is it critical or is it not critical?
Okay,
When will the year-to-date stuff post?
year
As
to
far-
date.
Yeah, most current,
Basically that's what last meeting was. And so they went through
right, that's, I think, 5 months.
5 months. Well, it was about halfway through, right, Peter?
Yeah, it was a year to date. So if you go back and look at that, what was presented last week, it would have been expenditures and revenues right up till the 13th of January. So basically 6
Okay.
months. There's a few things we still haven't quite recorded in there. That's mostly in the enterprise fund, like some depreciation schedules and stuff, but that doesn't really affect this discussion. It's more where are revenues at, what have we spent, the general fund and
So on the revenue side, the sales tax is considerably less than what you would think for half your
Yeah.
budget.
yeah,
Is that pretty much what you're expecting for the balance of this budget?
we don't know. So it's every just month by month. So at the end of this month, we'll get another sales tax, report from the state. And that will tell us if the trend is continuing kind of on a slide, which is where we're at right now, or if it's gonna come back up. There were some reasons why it went down, and part of that was some reassessments from the state, but the other reason was furloughs from the federal government. People weren't buying, and so that might come back up once people got their money back and they started buying stuff. Well, we'll just have to see. So we kind of monitored that. We're very, very closely monitoring that.
What's the fiscal year, remind me, is it July or January?
July 1, yeah.
July 1.
And just for some of the folks that maybe knew what this, the sales tax they provide is 2 years old. So, or 2 months. Yeah, sorry, 2 years. We'd never be able to plan that, no. So 2 months. So if you think about it, that's what he was talking about. It'd be month end. So, and it comes like the 21st or 22nd of the month. So you go back, December, so it'll be through November, right? Was just the one that will come tomorrow, right? Maybe.
Ish. They usually send me an email.
Yeah. So the last one we got was through October. That's why he was talking about furlough and stuff like that, because that's when the government shut down. So that's why. Some of the crazy things about how do you budget revenue when you only get it, 2 months in arrears, whatever. So I never understand that. It's like, we don't get our money till when? Anyway. So, all right. So that was a lot of, like I said, he talks for like 3 or 4 people. So, it's not even looking. Okay. So do we want to go through training next?
Sure.
Sure.
Okay. I brought some 1-page cheat sheets, and I don't anticipate that we will, necessarily hit every single item specifically, but this is just kind of a quick summary of how municipal budgets work. I know several of you have kind of sat through this discussion before. And I just want to reiterate that I think that at this level where it's kind of a working session, it works so much better if you have a question to ask it, especially if it's an acronym. Don't spend 15 minutes trying to figure out what the acronym is. Just pause and say, hey, John, what does URS mean? Right? Which is the Utah Retirement System for government employees. And I will try not to use acronyms, because especially talking to engineers, they'll use acronyms and you don't know where you're supposed to be. Is Tim still in the room?
No,
Okay.
no.
Okay.
So you stay lost.
Yeah. But under that first, it's kind of the second bullet, why budget decisions matter. It is the tension that the council faces is they're balancing service levels against taxes and fees, short-term savings versus long-term costs. We'll talk about that a lot as we're talking about our 10-year capital improvement plan. And then how growth impacts existing residents, everything, economic growth, new properties, all that sort of stuff kind of comes in. And then one of the nuances that is kind of unique to our city is this group. I don't know of another city that does kind of a citizen budget committee. It has, I think, in a lot of ways provided some good things for the city. One of those things is it allows the tension to happen in this room as opposed to the council room. And the reason why I think that's helpful is it's easier to thresh out these ideas, because in a council room, usually, they might have 30 minutes to an hour to talk about something that this group can spend 2 or 4 hours on if needed, right? And so it's a little bit easier to work through. But again, the kind of the goals of this group is provide the council with policy level considerations. And that could be, on a policy level, we do not want to fix the McGriff Park bathroom, right? We're not going to replace that Bowery. It's not a high priority from this group, understanding that the council still makes the ultimate decision. Brian kind of referenced that when he was talking earlier, that sometimes the council, they still are their own group. They get to vote. 3 people make a decision. Oftentimes they're unanimous, but not always. And so this group kind of digs into stuff and makes a recommendation to the council. With that, the council over the past 2 years has identified their 4 priorities that they're calling pillars. One is public safety. The second one is community unity. The third one is employee retention. and the fourth one is economic growth. So those are the things where they're trying to focus their efforts and really the budget on those. And you can see, and I'm going to just kind of skip down to the bottom of the page. Or sorry, never mind. I'm jumping ahead of myself way too far. But that's, in theory, that's the four things they're budgeting for. And what that allows, Dave, myself, and other department heads to do is when the council wants to do something that's maybe outside of those four pillars that we haven't budgeted for, we can have a conversation about, does this align with your goals? Because we all get, or I should say the council all gets folks calling them saying, hey, I've got a pothole in front of my house that's the most important thing in the city right now. And, sometimes it is important, sometimes it's not. And the four goals is help the council kind of stay focused on what's the long-term game plan. Again, focusing on that short-term savings, long-term cost conversation.
Can you give me those four pillars again? Public safety, community unity.
Employee retention and economic growth. And public safety isn't just police. I would put categories, or I would put streets in that category. Infrastructure, the resiliency of our water infrastructure is a public safety concern. Community unity, and a lot of times focuses around Parks and Rec and the idea of how the community gets together. But I'd also include some of the efforts that Katie and Ryan have been doing as far as transparency and getting the word out about, hey, this is what's going on in the city. Here's where the meetings are. Just making sure that people who want to be involved can get the information they need. Employee retention, in large part, and retention is focused on not having to keep retraining people. We've been in a pretty good realm for the past little while. I think Dave could probably tell you, I think in the room, he's the one who's been here the longest. We've gone through periods where we were training, we were having 25, 30% turnover, and the impact that was on the city. Economic growth is kind of something that the city's just delving into. In the past, we've historically kind of just let businesses come to us. And we haven't done a lot to encourage folks to come. The council wants to emphasize that as a process to try and get more sales tax in the city. So for every $100 that's spent in the city, $1 of it goes to what they call the local tax. And then that's split into two pieces. 50 cents goes to the state and is distributed based on where population is. And then the other 50 cents goes directly to the city where the dollar's spent. So if you spend $100 on groceries, 50 cents goes to North Ogden City's budget. And that's where I'll kind of jump down to that category at the bottom of the page. That's sales tax and use tax. So use would be like your Comcast taxes and other franchise taxes that you pay with some of your bills that you have at your house. Those account for about 54% of the city's revenues. Those are non-discretionary. The city doesn't have any real say in that, other than if we can somehow generate economic growth and drive more sales tax generating businesses into the city. The one we talk about the most is the property tax, which is about 26% of the budget on revenues. And that's because that's the one the city actually has some say in. There is a bill that's being proposed for the state legislature this year that cities be limited to 5% as a maximum increase. I don't know if that'll pass or not. But if you've been in any of the budget sessions for, last 6 years, that's kind of what I always recommend, 3 to 5% every year. Because I think that helps the city keep up with inflation. As you all know, your costs have gone up. City is a consumer as well, and our costs go up too. But I don't want to make that sound like that doesn't mean there aren't places we can employ technology or find maybe a program or something that maybe doesn't provide the benefit that the city thinks it does. Back again to that service levels versus taxes and fees. I think, Peter, I'm going to try and paraphrase what you said today, Peter. What are we doing that we shouldn't, or what aren't we doing that we should, is maybe a good conversation for this group to have. One of the most common themes that comes up, and Becca knows I pick on her, is recreation. It's always a topic when you're talking about taxes, is should cities be involved in recreation programs? And even some people will say parks in general. For historically, North Ogden City has said we will be involved. We think it's a valuable thing for us to invest in, but that doesn't mean that will always be the case. And like I said, Becca knows that I use her as an example because it's kind of one of those that gets brought up every year in every public tax hearing I've ever been aware of. Someone gets up and says, why are we spending so much money on the recreation program, or something that the city doesn't need? And usually those individuals they're heavily focused on public safety. Oftentimes that's where all the money should go, not to parks. And that's a perfectly legitimate approach. Historically, the council has chosen to include the Parks and Rec into the conversation. It's just, just as an example.
Isn't that structure set that you can't charge more than what the actual cost is?
That's for those fees. And that's actually going to be the number 4 on this list. Usage permits and fees for services, that 5.6 of the revenue. Those are the fees that statute applies to, that says you have to prove that you're charging only what it costs to provide the service. A good example is, and I'll pick on Northview Fire, where the mayor works, but the fire marshal can only charge an inspection fee that covers his time to go out and do the inspection, and his vehicle, his computer, and, all that. There's some overhead that's tied into that. But that's typically where most of these, or that's what the statute applies to. The council went through the recreation fees recently, which is that, let's see. I guess that would fall under number 4 as well. So recreation, for example, we technically can't charge more than it costs to do the service. We currently are not charging enough to cover what it costs to do the services. The fees for rec
John,
cover,
so that means that we are subsidizing Parks and Recreation. Because we're not charging enough for the fees to cover it. So the other residents are subsidizing it, is that correct?
So, I mean, that's one way to say it. The sales tax, I like to think of it as the sales tax dollars, but it's in general, it's all the tax dollars, because they all go into the same pot. Everything on this list, this 1 through 7, all just kind of go into the same pot and get spent, with the exception of those fees that are used to pay for services. Like, it's fairly easy to tie those to, hey, these fees go to this group, the building inspection fees go to the building inspection department. They're still technically in the same pot.
But what he's going for, and I think, and that's what we've tried to do, is that you pay to play.
Right.
And that's kind of the vision, at least from our standpoint to staff, is that if there's a department that is providing a service and they're not getting compensated from, because it's individual, like, playing soccer or something. Well, no, soccer SWAT, but whatever the city provides, then they should be recovering as much. Now, it's not covering staff, and that's the thing that we've kind of said, well, okay, up to everything but staff. And so that's the thing I think would be the next step, but that would price us out of everything. And is that a good or bad thing? It depends on your point of view. And so, but you can't pay to play for parks. And I think you were talking about last year, maybe. Anyway, but
I
that's,
prefer the term pay for use, not pay to play. That's a
Okay.
little federal bribery.
Yeah.
But if you're using something, you pay for it. And that's something that I'm a big proponent of. But John, I want to go back to something you said on this number 1 over here, the sales and usage taxes.
Yeah.
Who sets that 54% is what the city gets. Who sets that? Is that the state set that rate or amount, or how does that work?
So, like, the sales tax number goes up and down depending on how many dollars are spent.
Right.
So this is just last year, or for this budget year, this is what we budgeted in revenues, is that 54% will come from these
So who
taxes.
sets that sales and usage tax rate or amount? Is it set at the
It's
state level?
state, yeah.
Okay.
So like the state's the one that says it's 1% of that number gets divided among the local
And
jurisdictions.
we rely heavily on that sales and usage tax because that is more consistent than sales tax. Is that?
No, well,
If
it's,
54% of our budget is that sales and usage tax, then we're relying heavily on it.
mhm. And the biggest dip we've seen in that number is we lost 20% of the revenue. So in this case, it would have been, call it 11% of our sales tax would have dropped out, or 11% of our revenue, but we lost 20% of our revenue in 2008 when the market crashed. And that's when the city went through and eliminated several part-time positions and just scaled back a whole bunch of stuff for 4 to 6 years. And then several of those things were brought back because it is such a unpredictable thing. The only thing that's predictable is property tax.
Right. So even the sales and usage tax is not very predictable.
No. I guess what I'm saying is I think you can count on 80% of what we think is going to come in. Just historically, we've never not gotten at least 80%. But I mean, it's a real number. There's $1 million that in theory could flex one way or another, depending on what the economy does.
So is the franchise fee the same in every city through the state?
It's capped. Yeah, so most cities just charge the max and most franchisees pay it. So a franchisee is like Comcast, Rocky Mountain Power. So on your bill, there'll be a utility tax, or it's one of those fees that shows up on there. And it goes to the city to basically pay them. So they pay us to use our right of ways to run their lines and things like that. And it also covers the amount of damage they do when they come and tear stuff up to redo their work. They still have to replace it, but it does do some wear and tear on our roads and right of ways.
Can you add Trent as a computer, not a person that you can talk on the Zoom?
Right, if you look at those first two, I mean, that is,
It's 80%.
80%
Yeah.
of our budget. And so if you want to rely less on sales and usage taxes, the only way you can do that is to increase property taxes. And North Ogden historically has made the decision, council has made the decision that we're going to lean on sales and franchise taxes more than we are going to lean on property taxes. Other cities don't have a very different percentage breakdown than we do.
Yeah, I just had a hypothetical. Maybe this isn't the right time to bring it up, but what if we put different departments' revenue based on the security of the revenue source, meaning needs come out of property taxes because that's pretty much guaranteed. I'm brainstorming, so it's maybe out of line.
And they do,
Okay.
because remember the police,
Yep.
everything,
Yep.
yeah, okay.
And then some of the other stuff, is that how it's done? That some of the other departments, their budget may fluctuate because sales tax is down?
Well, other than the enterprise
Okay.
funds, no department has revenue. It all comes from the general fund. Right, so the police department, they don't have a revenue stream other than what gets allocated to them from taxes, sales taxes and property taxes. Same with Parks and Rec. They don't have a revenue stream.
Right.
The
but
water department does.
They
the
do,
sewer
it's
department.
filtered through another they're filtered through the general
Through the
fund.
general
That is
fund,
their
right? So
revenue.
there's not a direct revenue stream where you can say, okay, parks or whatever, you bring in this much money a year, so we're gonna cap your budget at that. It's not broken down like that.
Could it be broken down
I
like
don't
that?
think so.
Well, so any policy could be set. That's the city council could say, hey, we want to say, like they did with property tax, and say every dollar that comes in for property tax goes to public safety, meaning police salaries and equipment. And then they could say, and of the sales and use tax, the first 20% or the first $2 million goes to public safety, because the property tax doesn't cover the expense for public safety.
Okay.
So they could set those up and basically kind of say, as the jar gets more and more full, imagine back in the 80s when you built those little sand jars with the different colors, right? When you get to those top colors in sales tax, then you can say that's when we're going to pull the trigger on funding X, Y, and Z.
The wants versus the needs. So
Correct.
it sounds like this conversation has been had, or discussions have been had about it.
Yeah, but I think the bottom line is, how do you budget for that? Because like you said, we don't know, we're guessing, literally guessing educatedly, educated guess wise for the sales tax revenue. Everything else you can kind of base it off of previous years. Sales tax is a educated guess. And so you're budgeting against that. And if it comes in low or something crazy happens, then you have contingencies. And I think they talked about that. And I think 10% hit, I think has already been talked about, of what would happen if you got a 10% revenue hit, which would be about $1 million in our current environment, so,
Yeah.
so
And-
anyway.
And I probably should have identified, it does say it on this, but this is the general fund, right? So that's what we're talking about is general fund. We talked a little bit about enterprise funds, which is water, sewer, storm, and garbage. Those have their own set of fees. Nate, our building official's in the room. He's unique in that he's the only general fund department that pays for itself.
Sounds like there's some improvement for us to make. That. We got one guy that can do it or one that can figure it out.
But
Yeah.
But one other thing you said, like parks, can't charge enough for that, but then you also talked about inspections, so almost every function in the general fund does not generate enough revenue to fund itself.
Yes, yeah.
But I mean, all of them could generate some, but some of them a bigger percentage than others, but that's the case on everything in the general fund, is they don't have a specific revenue source.
Well, and like Sandy just was poking a little bit of fun at Scott, which is perfectly acceptable. We encourage teasing Scott. But planning does charge fees from home builders, subdivisions, people like that. It's just not enough to cover the amount of staff it takes. And
Yeah.
the logic in theory, and again, this is policy that the council can wrestle with, is that a lot of what they do is to protect and work with the existing residents. And so, then it starts coming into, well, then the sales tax maybe should cover that. But this conversation about what should sales tax cover and when you should say yes to certain things and on a fat year, you might say yes, on a lean year, you say no. 100% in the realm of this discussion for helping the council set some policies. Because we can't say yes to everything. The budget, before the council even sees the budget, Dave and Peter and I can guarantee you we're gonna shave $600,000 out of the general fund.
Can we request from the department heads some information? For example, Parks and Rec, what has their budget changed in the last 5 years? What has the participation levels changed? Is that stuff we can ask for? I mean, I'm curious to see the 5-year trend. I don't want to go back to 2008 when everything went to pop, but the 5-year trend, I think would be valuable for us and the council, and maybe this information that you guys already have. But I think that's a valuable thing to consider when you're looking at budgets. Like, what's the trend? If the revenue is going down and the participation is going down, then that's an indicator. If the revenue is going up, the participation is going up, another indicator. So again, I think there's some.
But I see where you're going, but I guess the question is, from participation in sports or other things that are paid to use, do we care? And I'm being flippant, but that's.
Yeah, I think we care because for
Because-
information purposes, if nothing more than that.
But that's, I guess the question really comes down to, if you're covering the cost, and if it goes up or down.
But we just said that we're only covering the cost, one department's is the only one covering the cost of it.
True, but if that department, whatever it is bringing in a certain amount of money and it's covering it.
Correct.
But
So
how do you,
we'll
but there's no way
eliminate
to.
him, But the rest of the departments, is there a
Exactly.
way that we can get that information? I'm
Yeah.
thinking specifically more the wants of the city, the rec department,
Yeah.
what is the participation level? Is that increasing or decreasing? Is it stagnant? Is it up and
I
down?
mean, the pool, we track that. I know that for sure.
And now,
that's-
what's their deficit?
Yeah.
every year?
Well, and so I think that's, because we can bring, the one thing I promised Peter is that this group won't impose 20 hours of a week on him because he's trying to finish the audit and get the budget going for next year. But I think that if we can, and this is, I think, the next agenda item is talking about future agendas. If you can give very clear parameters, like if you said, hey, tell me recreation participation,
Yeah.
recreation revenues,
Yep.
each of the past 5 years, I think we can grab it.
Okay,
Pretty
that's what
quick.
my question. And
So
can we
that
get-
everybody's involved in providing us the information. I mean,
And then it'll help.
Yeah, cool, absolutely.
Yeah, and then it'll help to direct the discussion on the things that this group feels is most important. Like, I don't want you to just say, I don't want you to take what I want to talk about. It needs to be what you as a group want to talk about, because you're the ones that are making the recommendation to the council. I mean, I'm still gonna make my own recommendation to the council on other stuff, and maybe the same stuff. It's just the council has to sort through it all and decide what the final number
Well,
is.
I think this information is also helpful to the citizens. We can say, look, our our demand for this particular area is increasing and our budget is decreasing, so we're, I think that information, if it's available to the public, will also help them on some of these phone calls to the council.
And I think
Budget's
that gets
decreasing, are you
everybody
saying-
involved in this
But I'm saying,
process.
yeah,
They have,
if the demand is
they
increasing.
have,
the
and I
budget's
don't
decreasing,
like the
the
word
information's cut.
justify, but
We've
they
got
have to
to
provide
figure it out.
Yes,
information.
yes, yes.
That's right.
You're talking about backup for it, yeah.
I'm just thinking factual information of the data for the
Yeah.
last 5 years would be helpful for everybody involved to make a decision.
And it'd be good, because again, I'm gonna pick on Nate, because he's here. Maybe I should try and pick on everyone before we get done. But, we had a building inspector who retired 18 months ago. And it actually was right at the same time we started seeing a trend in building permits starting to drop. And so we went from 3 inspectors to 2. And Nate and I chat every now and then, are we still good? Because you're exactly right, as the demand has gone down, we don't need the extra body. But if the demand's going up and we're not adding to it, water's a good discussion for that. Is we're able to fight off some of the extra bodies that we would have needed in water because technology was able to take the place of the meter readers. And so there's things like that we can show, and if there's some way to explain it and understand, that would be helpful. But there's the one thing I would caution is anytime we start talking about national trends, it becomes problematic because we are not
Oh, yeah.
I'm not talking,
Nebraska,
I'm talking.
yeah.
Too broad.
Well, Well, and I'm just saying, it's one of those things I fight with the council, and not really fight with the council, but also with the department heads. And I'll just pick on Parks and Rec. The national average for acreage of parks per 1,000 residents is 6. North Ogden's at about 3. However, we have national forest land and trails that are literally right out our front doors that don't account for our 6 acres, but in New York, they don't have that. And so that, the acres are different. And so, and the other one that'll come up often is officers per 1,000. National average is 2, we're closer to 1. In a city like Chicago, it's higher. In a city like Plain City, it's lower. And that with Kate and his
Yeah.
involvement, that sometimes the policing level rise to the need. And, especially when you're talking officer safety, some of those cities, they do not do any work alone, where our officers are still able to go around alone and do most of their work by themselves. And, they can call for backup when they need it, but they don't usually need it. So does that answer your question?
Yeah, like, I just wonder if, again, we can get some of that information. That's,
Yeah.
Talk it back. Yeah, I got you.
Let's see, just to kind of get through, or not get through, but just make sure I hit the other salient points on this list. Truth in taxation, as we talked about, that's the only way the council can increase property tax. Something that happened recently with our transportation utility fee discussion. We anticipate the statute is going to be modified to require a public hearing as part of that process, which is why we did a public hearing. It wasn't required, but that's why we included it, is just to try and get ahead of the statute and just be, make it as open and transparent as we could. So that's where we went that way. This where the money goes, which is kind of the third section down. This is the general fund. 41% goes to police. 24% is going to streets and infrastructure. That would include like utilities for this building, maintenance and things. Parks and Rec gets about 11% of the total budget. And then the city administrative support is about 24%. And that's folks like the recorder's office. See, there I am picking on you. My position, finance, all those departments that are kind of actually, we're technically billed out to all the other departments in the city. So the enterprise funds actually send a little bit of money to the general fund every year to help cover my salary, Ryan's salary, Peter's salary, because they utilize our services. And so that's baked into the fees that each of us pay on our homes, water and utility bills each year or each month.
And if you read in the budget, it'll be what's called an admin fee offset.
Yep.
And so that's what that is that all they collectively put in a pool, so to speak, and then divvy out to different organizations,
Like an overhead charge.
basically.
Well, yeah, and and the best example, probably the largest charge that the utility fees pay that go into the system are through motor pool. So the backhoes are owned by the general fund, but the water fund uses the backhoe, and so they pay a portion of the lease that we pay on the backhoe every year to help cover their expense. And so there's a sheet that kind of tracks all that and shows this is based on our estimate of usage, how it's divided out. And even like police pays into the motor pool fund because they rely on the mechanics to outfit their cars and change their oil and all those kind of things. And so there's a sheet that just kind of maps it out.
It's not easy.
It's not simple. Katie left the room, but we'll pick on her even though she left the room. She's on that sheet, her salary and stuff, and it's kind of just based on employees. Let's just say 50% of the employees are in public works or in those utility enterprise funds. And so we charge 50% of her salary and overhead for her office to them to help cover it so that the general fund isn't just having to support it. It's not a requirement that we do it that way. It's just the way we do it to make sure that the enterprise funds are paying their share. It's one of those things where it's still coming out of the resident's pocket because it goes to that utility bill that we pay each month. And if it didn't go to the utility bill, then it would have to come out of either sales tax or property tax would be the other two sources that could really help cover that. And those are the kind of the reasons that